Hi friends! Welcome back to the Round Door podcast. Kat, do you remember our last episode? The story of Ma Liang and the magic brush?
Of course I remember. When Ma Liang painted with his brush, the fish swam right into the water and the birds flew up into the sky. It was so magical.
That's right. Today's story is also about a painter whose art comes to life. But this time, the painter isn't a child. He's an adult. And his story gave us an idiom that people still use today.
Ooh, what's the idiom?
It's called 画龙点睛, when the dragon gets its eyes.
That sounds mysterious.
It is every bit as magical as a Ma Liang story. Let's listen together. Long ago, during the time of the northern and southern dynasties in China, there was a bustling city called Jinling, the place we call Nanjing today. Inside Jinling, the streets twisted and turned every which way. Vendors sold sugar-coated hawthorn skewers by the road, children flew kites, and peddlers carried bamboo poles balanced on their shoulders as they walked back and forth. On the western side of the city stood a temple called Anle Temple. Inside its grounds rose a tall pagoda and gently curving roof eaves. From morning till night, you could hear the monks chanting their sutras. At the time, the most famous painter in Jinling was a man called Zhang Sengyao. Sengyao had loved painting ever since he was little. When other children played in the mud, he would sit nearby with a twig in his hand, drawing on the ground. As he grew, his paintings looked more and more as if they were alive. The flowers he painted seemed to give off a faint, sweet fragrance. The birds he painted were so detailed you could see every tiny feather on their wings. Everyone praised Sengyao and said he was a painter sent down from heaven. One day, the old monk from the Anle Temple came personally to visit Sengyao's home to ask for a favor. The old monk said,
Mr. Zhang, inside Anle Temple, there is a tall, wide white wall that stands completely bare. It seems like such a waste. We were hoping you might paint something on it so that those who come to worship Buddha will feel joy in their hearts. Would you be willing?
Sengyao thought about it for a moment, then agreed.
Sure. For the temple wall, I'll paint 4 dragons. Dragons are auspicious and majestic. They'll be perfect.
When the old monk heard this, his eyes lit up at once. He hurried back to the temple to prepare paints and brushes. The next day, before the sun had fully risen, Sengyao arrived at the Anle Temple. He stood in front of the great white wall, closed his eyes, and remained perfectly still for a long while, as if he was having a quiet conversation with the wall itself. When the sun finally climbed above the rooftops, he opened his eyes, took a deep breath, picked up his brush, dipped it in paint, and began to paint on the wall. From that moment on, Sengyao seemed like a completely different man. His hand flew across the wall. One moment he was bent over painting a dragon's tail. The next, he was on tiptoe, reaching up to paint a dragon's head. The scales he painted on each dragon were neat and even, one after another, glinting with the golden light. The whiskers he painted were long and fine, as if a breeze were lifting them into the air. He painted the dragon's claws with all 5 toes, gripping tightly onto the clouds, every talon clear and sharp. For 3 days straight, Sengyao hardly rested at all. He just kept painting. Finally, on the evening of the 3rd day, all 4 white dragons were finished. The first dragon coiled proudly inside a bank of clouds, looking ready to leap out at any moment to protect Anle Temple. The second dragon wrapped its body around an old pine tree, looking playful and full of mischief. The third dragon had its mouth wide open, as though its roar could carry across vast distances. The fourth dragon swooped this way and that across the sky, its movements gentle and graceful, beautiful to behold. As soon as the word of the mural at Anle Temple spread, the whole city of Jinling came running to see it.
Wow, these 4 dragons look like they're alive. Come look, that dragon with his mouth open looks like it's about to speak. They're painted exactly like the real thing.
The crowd pressed in close to the wall. The longer they looked, the more they loved Sengyao's 4 dragons. Among the crowd was a little girl. As she stared and stared, she asked in a small voice,
Why don't any of these dragons have eyes?
Once she said this, everyone rushed in for a closer look. Sure enough, on every dragon's face, the spot where the eye should have been was completely blank, without even a single dot of black.
How strange! He painted everything so carefully. How could he have left out the eyes? Maybe he just hasn't finished yet?
And so the crowd gathered around Sengyao, each person calling out a question. He set down his brush, smiled, and answered.
It isn't that I forgot the eyes. I left them out on purpose.
Hearing that, the crowd was even more confused than before.
On purpose?
Sengyao nodded and said,
I painted these 4 dragons with great care and with all of my heart. If I draw in their eyes, they will come alive. They'll fly off at once and never stay on this wall again. That's why I truly don't dare to add that one final stroke.
Everyone went quiet for a moment, and then someone burst out laughing.
Mr. Zhang, aren't you being too modest? How could painted dragons actually fly? Dragons without eyes look strange. Please, just go ahead and paint them in.
Sengyao quickly waved his hands.
It really won't do. Trust me on this one, please.
But the more he protested, the less willing the crowd was to drop it. Some laughed and said he was joking. Some said he was being irresponsible. Others simply planted themselves in front of the wall and said they wouldn't leave until they saw the dragon's eyes. Sengyao felt very torn. He knew what he was saying was true, but no one believed him. Finally, he gave a long sigh and said,
All right, I'll dot in the eyes of just 2 dragons and leave the other 2 as they are. Will that do?
At last, everyone agreed. Sengyao picked up his thinnest brush and dipped a tiny bit of it into the black paint. He walked first to the big white dragon coiled in the clouds, took a deep breath, gave a quick flick of his wrist, and drew in its left eye. Then he painted in the right eye too. Then he stepped over to the dragon dancing across the sky and did the same on both of its eyes. In that very instant, the clear sunny sky suddenly changed. Dark clouds came rolling in from out of nowhere, surging together in great heavy masses until the whole city of Jinling was wrapped in gray gloom. A flash of lightning cut across the sky and lit up all of Anle Temple in a sudden ghostly white. Right after that came a huge rolling boom of thunder. People squeezed together in fright, clinging to one another and trembling.
What's happening? Why has the sky suddenly turned like this?
Just then, the great white wall actually began to shake, letting out a sharp, cracking sound. With a loud crash, 2 deep cracks split open along the wall. The 2 dragons whose eyes had been dotted in slowly rose up out of the cracks. Their scales glittered in the lightning, and their whiskers streamed in the wind. They opened their great mouths, let out long, thundering roars, lashed their tails once, and shot up into the dark clouds in the sky. Everyone looked up and saw the 2 giant dragons circle through the clouds a few times, climbing higher and higher, farther and farther, until at last they disappeared completely. After a little while, the dark clouds slowly drifted apart, and the sun peeked out through a gap. The sky turned blue again, and everything around Anle Temple grew still, as though nothing had happened at all. But when everyone turned to look at the wall, they all stood frozen in shock. There had been 4 dragons on the wall before. Now, only 2 remained. One wound around the old pine tree, the other with its mouth wide open. Those two stayed perfectly still on the wall because they had no eyes. And where the two flown away dragons had been, all that remained were two big jagged holes in the wall. The crowd in front of Anla Temple all lowered their heads at once, not daring to make a sound. From that day on, only two eyeless white dragons remained on the white walls of Anla Temple. And only then did everyone understand. Sometimes, the most precious, most essential piece is the very last little stroke you add. This story eventually became a well-known idiom. People use the phrase 画龙点睛, or when the dragon gets its eyes, to describe the moment in writing, speaking, or any kind of work when you add one or two crucial details in just the right place, and the whole thing suddenly becomes more vivid, more complete, and more meaningful. Just like a painting, where the moment its eyes are added in, it magically springs to life.
Wow, what a magical story. Are the eyes really that important?
In this story, the eyes really are the most important stroke. Without them, the dragons are just shapes on a wall. With them, the dragons come alive.
So when do people actually use the idiom 画龙点睛 when the dragon gets its eyes in real life?
Let me give you a few examples. For instance, my teacher said the last sentence of my essay was like when the dragon gets its eyes. That means the final sentence is what made the whole essay shine.
Oh, I think I'm getting it. Tell me another one.
Here's another one. When he tells a joke, the very last line is the funniest part. It's the dotting of the dragon's eye. In other words, that last punchline is what really makes the whole joke land.
Oh, so that's how it works. As long as you add one small detail in just the right place, you can call it 画龙点睛 when the dragon gets its eyes. Is that right?
Exactly right. So friends, the next time you draw a picture, write a story, decorate your room, or even make a dish in the kitchen, think about it. Which little detail is putting a bow on top or 画龙点睛?
I'll keep that in mind. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We'll see you next week for more story time. Bye bye!